I wanted to talk for a few moments today about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I'm reminded of the passage in Hosea chapter 8 and verse 7, where Hosea, the Old Testament prophet, was warning God's people who were involved in idolatry and worthlessness and worthless living, secularism, anti-God living. He said that you have sown to the wind and you will reap the whirlwind. I don't know whether the events of this last week, as horrific as they have been, and the low point, of course, is the assassination of the good and wonderful Christian man with a Christian family, Charlie Kirk. I don't know whether this is the beginning of reaping the whirlwind, or perhaps this is a time when we can reflect and see a better day. I'm not certain about that, but I do know the events of this last week have been absolutely devastating and horrific. We have the Church of Annunciation in Minneapolis, where a trans shooter murdered several children, put many in the hospital. I think 2 children died and many in the hospital. It was August 27. We had at the beginning of the week the Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska, murdered in cold blood by a knife-wielding thug, DeCarlos Brown Jr., who reportedly walked off saying, "I got that white girl." Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, if that had been turned around, if a white man had stabbed a black girl to death, walking off saying, "I got that black girl," we would see absolutely the entire country burn down. But that's the difference between the left and the right. But more about that in just a moment. But most especially, I am so impressed with Erica Kirk. What a great woman of God. I thought, how can she stand up after the assassination of her husband and speak the way that she did? To me, I don't know. My wife and I sat there in tears watching her as she spoke to the country such heartfelt message. What a tragic, tragic blow. Many people have pointed out, and I do believe it's correct, that this is really a turning point. That was Charlie's, of course. That was his podcast, and that was his organization. But this is a watershed or turning point in America. And whether we're going to go in a better direction or not is yet to be seen. But I do know this, that as Hosea put it in Hosea chapter 8 and verse 7, if you sow to the wind, you will reap the whirlwind. You sow to emptiness, devoid of any meaning, and this is what the kind of life that you're going to be in and what kind of country you're going to live in. In the 1960s, early 1960s, the Bible was removed from public schools. Any kind of biblical education removed in the late 50s and early 1960s. It used to be in the American classrooms, the elementary classrooms, and the junior high and high school, and the collegiate classrooms, that the Bible was honored. Particularly in high school and grade schools, the Bible was honored and people read the Bible. They had prayers. They said the Pledge of Allegiance. But as we've turned our attention now from the 1960s forward, we've had complete change in a secular world, in a secular government, in a secular, that is, godless society. It might be best illustrated by a poster I saw in a public school here in Wichita Falls several years ago, in which the Pledge of Allegiance was printed on the poster. It said, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." What words do they leave out? They left out the key words, and that is one nation under God. We have excluded God from the classroom, from the public square. We've excluded him almost from the pulpits as well. And what God has had to say on sin in our society, many pulpits are very silent. But we have eliminated God from the classroom. We have instead trained children in a secular worldview, an empty worldview that has absolutely no moral foundation, no moral code. There is no right and wrong. And someone may say on the left, well, we have morals. Upon what do you base it? if there is no God, and if we're not going to be based upon a God-centered worldview, a Christian worldview, upon what do you base it? And that is exactly what's been going on for more than 40 years in our country. And we're beginning to see the secularism now that we have sown to the wind, and now we're beginning to reap the whirlwind. David Barton has a great book on original intent regarding the Constitution and the intent of the framers of the Constitution. But one thing he had in the book, and I'll never forget, he had charts in the book that shows us from the time that the Bible and God was eliminated in schools and in public education, from that moment on, all of the immorality began to skyrocket in America. For example, after the Bible was eliminated from schools and prayer was eliminated from schools, then single-parent households began to increase dramatically. The shift was seismic. So also with STDs began to explode in the public school system. Violent behavior is well known. Teachers know about it. Teenage pregnancies continue to run completely out of control in the public school system. Abortion, all of these immoral acts and all of these immoral behaviors skyrocketed, absolutely skyrocketed, if you look at the charts on the number of incidences after the Bible was removed. And so we have created a secular culture, sadly and grievously, and yet this is some of the whirlwind that we seemingly are now beginning to reap. And the sad assassination of a good and honest and Christian man, Charlie Kirk. Are we entering into a darker period? I don't know. We may be. Or are we coming perhaps more closely to the light as a culture, as a society, as a people? I don't know. But I do know one thing, and that is what is taking place in America is a war. It's a war against Christianity. I think the best commentary that I've heard on this is by Rachel Campus Duffy, who's a contributor to Fox News, and she was commenting on what the questioner, the MC of the question, or the host of the show, was asking her, and he asked her regarding the culture of America, and is it seeming that this is all a war against the right? So, yes, it's a war against the right. That's what we've seen, opening up a war against the right, a war against conservatives. But here's what Rachel Campus Duffy commented on, and here's what she said, and I'm paraphrasing for what I remember hearing. She said, this is deeper than that because this is really a war against Christianity, against Christian people, against Christian values. It is not simply a war against the right. It is not simply a war against conservative values. It is a war against Christians. We are in a horrific war for the heart and soul of America and the heart and soul of individuals and young people in this country. And I'm reminded of the passage that Paul stated in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 5, beginning in verses 3 through 5. The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, that is, not physical, but they are mighty before God to the casting down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, which means reasonings, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that is exalted against the knowledge of God, and bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being in readiness to avenge all disobedience, that is, by church discipline at the church of Corinth to which he was writing, when your obedience shall have been made full. Did you hear what he had to say? The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh. They're not physical, but they are mighty before God to the casting down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, that is, philosophies, false philosophies that are being taught at the university campus level. We have university professors filling the classrooms, teaching Marxism, socialism, communism, Nazism, fascism. They're teaching those things, and yet this is how our young people are being fed. I want you to notice also, just to see the difference in the country. After the killing of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin, an officer that was on duty trying to subdue a man who was on drugs, and he killed him, and not to justify that at all. But what happened? The country absolutely exploded. Even though the officer was held accountable in a court of law and sentenced and serves a prison sentence, even though that be the case, the country exploded. Cities burned. People died. Private property was completely damaged. This is what the Black Lives Matter is all about. It's a socialistic revolution. But here we have a Christian man, Charlie Kirk, simply seeking to teach people about the love of Jesus Christ and a God-centered worldview and what God has to say on various subjects, and he is gunned down, assassinated. Absolutely shocking, but here is the key point. What has our country looked like since that day? What has happened across the globe? We have prayer vigils, people stopping concerts. I read where even Mick Jagger stopped a concert and had a moment of silence and then led everybody in God Bless America in New York City. That is the complete difference between the left burning down cities and the right. That is those who have a Christian-centered worldview. And here's something interesting also. I remember several years ago when Obama was president that military members, that is active duty military officers and enlisted men, could never participate in a Tea Party activity, could never participate in any gathering in which any political issue was discussed in any way whatsoever, lest they be tainted or lest they be reprimanded and disciplined by higher authorities in the military. And yet, as Charlie Kirk has been assassinated, I see military members, many of them black military members, putting on Facebook and on X, talking about that they are happy that he died and supporting the socialistic thugs who killed this man. That is such a stark contrast. But I tell you what, the employees across this country who support the killing of an innocent man, taking him away from his sweet wife and his children, a man who espoused Christian values, the demonic party on the left celebrating his death, absolutely demonic. But I'll tell you this, Christianity will triumph. I have this statement. I'm reading from, and I was absolutely in utter unbelief in reading the statement from the demonic left. This is from Perrin Baxter, who is a political leader of the Democratic Party in North Carolina. He says there's absolutely a price, and he's talking about the death of Charlie Kirk, a price for being a fascist. There's a price for evil. All this, he had a family, he was only 31, is pure nonsense. Y'all doing this dance puts his life over the countless lives of people that he danced in the blood of. What are you talking about? It seems to me that people who are going to go out there on X and put these things out, especially if a leader in a Democratic Party should have some kind of semblance to truth, but this guy has really lost it. He said, y'all are literally doing the work of white supremacy by posting or expressing more sadness when Charlie, and then he says, blank Kirk, a hate monger, dies than you do when black people are killed or brown people are harassed or Palestinians are smashed into gooey red paste with our tax dollars. That's proof of how much internalized and embraced white supremacy is within so many in America, left or right, Democrat or Republican. For years, this man normalized and defended things like the murder of George Floyd. What do you mean, normalized and defended the murder? No one's defending the murder of George Floyd. But I will say this. George Floyd was on drugs and he was apprehended and he resisted arrest, I'm not going to say that Derek Chauvin did correct when he took his life, but I am going to say this. There's a difference there in a man who was resisting arrest and a man who was simply preaching the morals of Jesus Christ in a public platform. But he says, the murder of George Floyd, to innocent children who barely know how to tie their shoes, being shot up in schools, to people at queer nightclubs getting mowed down by AR-15s, Jordan Neely being lynched on a subway train, and of course, the genocide in Gaza. He did this for many news cycles, and it was simply excused as conservative. We all had to sit there, grin and bear it. Well, I'll tell you this, Perrin Baxter, you didn't grin and bear any of that because you didn't hear any of that. That's none of it. That is not anything you heard. No one danced on the graves of anyone. No one justified the deaths of any of those things. Least of all, Charlie Kirk. Perhaps it would be good to get an education before you go out on X. Then he has this, and now the idea of those of us who fight every day for and advocate for a better world. What? That he could have lived and must now perform sadness so the neo-Nazis and neo-Confederates who hate us won't react as silly white supremacy is a death cult, and Charlie Kirk was a casualty in their holy war. You don't even know what you're about, but I'll tell you this. This is what's happening. Unfortunately, many people in the black community who call themselves Christian are, number one, black first and Christian later. It's always got to be black first, and this is all this is about. This has nothing to do with Christianity, nothing to do with the Spirit of Jesus Christ, no factual information on here at all. Not only so, but Perrin Baxter doesn't even know what a Nazi is, apparently, and he doesn't even know what a fascist is. And he's calling this a holy war. Well, indeed, there is a holy war afoot. But I'll tell you this, Perrin Baxter and all of those on the left, Christianity will triumph. Charlie Kirk's movement will continue to triumph. He was for love and peace and justice across the board. He loved man, he loved mankind, he loved his family, just as I do. And this is indeed a war, but it is, as Paul put it, a spiritual warfare in which we are engaged. And we need to recognize that there are demonic forces afoot that are wanting to take down America itself, just as in the comments that we've read. But as signing off, I want to point out, I hope that we are not, as a country, about to reap the whirlwind. I know if the comments like Perrin Baxter are publicized, we are going to reap a whirlwind. But if Charlie Kirk's mission is fulfilled, and that is to spread the love of Jesus Christ in our communities and in our country, we're going to turn to a better page. And so God bless you, Charlie Kirk.